idea of a thing popping from nothingness into being and then popping out of being back into nothingness.
Yep.
is,
Yeah, it's like, what's that? You know?
Does a universe exist if there is no one to observe it?
You're right. That's right. That's right.
That is, this is a navel-gazing question.
Yes.
And yet one that...
Well, suddenly it's relevant, you know, in a way that you know, pre-quantum, people be like, well, that could be really fun in your coffee shop somewhere, but it has no relevance. But now it's like, oh, actually, at least at some level, it has some relevance. So anyway, my niece said too, she's the one that's high up in the Austin Unified School District. Like, you know, she started as a teacher and she's way up in the, but she said, well, you know, most of the time I would come toward political things much more like Alan than like Randy was telling my sister this. She was telling my sister this. Said, but you know, there's what I love is that the way they talk, it makes me think about why do I believe what I believe, and I like that Randy's point of view. He's obviously thought about it. It's not just, you know, because I think part of it being, even though she's in Austin, which is very much a progressive part of Texas, she's still more of an environment where she runs into the knee-jerk conservative position. So, but again, the way she responded, she says, I've listened to 5 of them so far, and I do it kind of while I'm doing some work on different things. And she said, you know, and it was like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So anyway, so there you go.
It is thrilling to hear. It simply reinforces the fact that we knew when we started having this conversation that this was something that other people would enjoy.
Yes. Yeah.
Hearing and then taking part in.
Yep.
And because it's, you know, there's intellectual curiosity here, and there's no one's trying to win an argument.
That's right. That's right.
Really, why do you think what you think? Not why do you think what you think?
That's right.
Really,
that's right.
Why do you think what you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's different.
Which, you know, that in itself, there was actually a part of from that one of the books I was reading, he said the question needed to shift from, is it reasonable, to what makes you think this might be the case because of quantum theory? That it was, you had to step back from just, is it reasonable? And if it's not, you're done, to, okay, why do you think this might be the case? And then you give the explanation of how it connects with other things. And you're like, oh, okay, then yeah, quantum theory, we still don't know what the heck it is in many ways, but it makes sense of so much that it's got to have validity, you know? I mean, anyway, I just thought that was, so it's almost like that's part of what we're doing is, you know, it's not, is it reasonable? If it is, we'll talk. If it's not, we're not going to talk. It's more like, well, wait, how are you coming up with this position? And trying to have a conversation that way. So maybe we're already having a quantum conversation, you know, already, you know, in our podcast. So.
Where does this something come from? And it seems like we've been doing this. Hey, I don't know when we played the theme music, but it must have been a while ago. I'm Alan Katz, and I've always been grateful to Hebrew School for making me the atheist I am today.
And I am Randy Lovejoy, and I am without a doubt not a quantum theorist in any way, although I am a huge fan of this primarily, and we'll talk more about it, but because I really do think it has an impact in terms of the way that we modern Westerners or postmodern Westerners or whatever you want to call yourself, think about spirituality. It actually opens the door from the previous generation in some interesting kind of ways. And we'll talk more about that.
Now, this is a subject really that we keep coming back to, what quantum theory really touches on, because of it takes all the rules and it throws them out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, while doing that, we need to figure out the logic of how the world works on the quantum level. Mm-hmm. And the rules, as we begin to figure them out, they make sense in and amongst themselves in lots of strange and unusual ways that that bend the imagination.
Yeah, as one person put it, physical processes are radically different than what everyday experience would lead us to expect. And that's, you're talking about, we still have science that makes all sorts of sense about physical processes as we experience them. But we've now opened up another level of experience where things don't work according to those processes. And I think that's part of what just kind of blew people's minds and is still something we're trying to figure out, because it's different than what we actually experience in our everyday lives. What goes on in the quantum world is different to what we experience in our everyday lives, but it's out there somewhere.
Yes. There it is.
Somehow.
It is where the mystery lives.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because we pushed back mystery in some ways in terms of our experience, but then suddenly we've unearthed this other thing, and it's like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Now this doesn't work according to all that other stuff. It doesn't throw everything else out the window, because all of that other stuff still works.
The problem begins with what Einstein figured out, the theory of relativity.
Yeah.
It works. He figured out the space-time and the relationship, and the effect of gravity, space-time on gravity, and it all works. And if you run it backwards, the Big Bang works. It all makes sense. So as a proof, if you run the whole thing backwards to make sure, as you run the film back through the projector and see the images all running backward towards the instant of the Big Bang, it all makes sense up until a point. And then suddenly, just in the moments before the instance, before the Big Bang, suddenly all the rules that make sense in the instant later don't make sense.
Yeah.
And therein is where quantum theory and quantum mechanics, that's where the problem, that's where they're trying to solve that problem. Why don't the rules make sense from the moment of the singularity's explosion to that moment where suddenly no rules become everything answered by the theory of relativity?
Yeah, I mean, and a couple of examples that at least helped me in some of the reading I did. And there's a couple of books that we've got in the notes that I would recommend. And I'm sure, I'm sure there are others out there, but those are a couple that I engaged and were helpful. But one of them, is that you used to say if there were two phenomena that were linked by a causal relation, okay, then you'd say the cause of that phenomenon was antecedent to the other. Like if you're looking for which one's the cause, here's two things. Which one's the cause? Well, it's the thing that's there before the other thing. That's the cause. And that totally works until you go into the quantum world. And now that's not necessarily true. And what they said, what the reading said is now the cause is the phenomena that's directly dependent upon the observer. Okay, now this is mind-blowing stuff, but it's like suddenly what I observe and see is the cause, not what was before the other thing, because in the quantum reality, time even changes. Which relativity had a definite connection with that as well. So that's just an example of one of the things. Causality, suddenly it's not just what's before and then what's after. It's much more complex than that.
Yes, and it all ultimately is trying to answer that question of causality, the first causality. It's trying to, if you go back, if we accept the premise that there is that singularity, we're still asking the question, and where did it come from?
Yeah.
What precedes the singularity?
Sure. That's right.
Now, of course, the answer can be nothing.
Yep. Sure.
But then it leaves another question. Then where did the something
exactly come from if it was nothing before that? Yeah.
And this is the question, this very what preceded the chicken and the egg question.
Yeah.
That's what quantum theory is trying to find an answer to that satisfies, but that also works in conjunction with what happens after that moment when suddenly the theory of relativity makes sense. The rules suddenly, right. Everything becomes big enough, and gravity and time and space-time now suddenly they exist where previously they didn't.
Like the world that we experience came into being, and that's what we experience. But now we're finding that there's something outside of our experience of the world that is there as well. Because, one of the other ones that, as I read it, that really moved us toward quantum theory was the idea that something can be both a wave and a particle, or it can act like a wave and a particle at the same time, when prior to that, they were two very separate things.
It's not,
but then suddenly it's like, no, wait a minute, this is working both as a wave and a particle, and it's the same thing. What the heck's going on? And that's where it starts to blow our brain cells. And
I'm fascinated by the idea that in quantum theory, something can exist and not exist at the very same instant.
Yeah.
And the Heisenberg principle is unknowable that, all right, if you think about it, an airplane that's traveling across the sky, as you look at it one moment, it's there. As you look at it the next, it's not there. And in terms of where you are looking and how you are looking and how you are measuring,
that has an impact on the actual thing itself. The way you measure and what being actually impacts the results.
But there's something beneath that, which is the person doing the measuring.
That's right.
And that becomes it asks a question. Does a universe exist if there's no observer to see it exist? Ultimately where one of the variables of what this is that quantum theory leads us to is the string theory, which suggests that this is not a universe, it is a multiverse. And that
that's where some people move to try to make sense of the data that we're getting related to quantum stuff.
Yeah, because in terms of what precedes that singularity, how do you answer that question?
Right.
And one of the fascinating, and it's fascinating because they can show you math that says this can happen. The idea that everything that we know of did come from nothing. And because in quantum theory, something can appear out of nothing so long as it disappears and doesn't remain there, but it can appear out of nothing. This supposes that at some point something popped into, nothing appeared into something, and suddenly something unusual happened. Rather than disappearing, it combusted. Mm-hmm. And that suddenly one possibility is it's this, another possibility is it's this times an infinite number of variations. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that in essence, what we perceive as this is a kind of bubble that is our particular universe. And we are surrounded by others. And in some of these other universes, there's no observer. There is no observer. And yet there they are. Quantum theory.
But see, and I think that another aspect of kind of the way quantum theory works is that scientists believe in quantum theory not because of objective, like string theory. It's
Correct.
Not because we can objectively prove a multiverse, but what it does do is it is a way to make intelligible a wider range of the next steps of what we're theorizing about. And so, instead of it being, is it objectively true? You're past that. Now you're at, does it make other things intelligible? And if it does make those other things intelligible, then we need to consider that as possibly being valid. And that's a different kind of footing than we were on before that, and to me, again, that connects to spirituality, because I've almost felt it as a pastor that, when I started as a pastor, there was still popularly a lot of, people thinking there is no spiritual, it's all material. But it was starting to just fade, and more people were starting to want to pursue spirituality. And to me, that's the connection, is that at least popular forms of science are no longer saying, we've got it all mapped out, and we've got reality all handled, and we know exactly what it is, and there is no need for any other approach to knowledge because we got it right here. But now science is having to say, what we've got still is valid and it's good, but it's not everything like we thought it was. We now know this, but there's this whole other thing now that we don't understand, and we don't even know how it connects to the stuff that we do understand. And so that opens up some other possibilities that we didn't, not too long ago in Western culture, we were completely closed to. So
in a way, the deeper we dive into the subject matter,
yeah,
smaller and smaller down to the nuts and bolts of the nuts and bolts,
yeah,
we suddenly discover, the world simply doesn't work down there the way that we think it does. And it matters because that's the foundation on which everything sits. It doesn't work the other way. And the little doesn't sit atop the big sits atop the little, really. These are the foundational things, and everything sits atop it. This is where all the logic springs from, such as logic is.
Yeah, and I think, one of the ways, another example in some reading I did that helped me kind of just think about it a little bit better in terms of just the two worlds that we're talking about, is that, the experienced reality that science has, really majored on and figured out cause, effect, and all that, to think of that as a live concert. Okay? So that's the live concert is what we experience here. But then the quantum world is like a CD recording of the live concert. So yes, the two relate to each other. They totally connect. But the CD is totally different than the live concert at the same time. And if, the example I was reading was if a space alien kind of came in and saw the CD, they wouldn't immediately say, oh, that's a live concert. They would look at the CD, they'd see the ridges and how it's all put together and all of that. They might not even get to the music of it, because it's the techno. So I like that. That's helpful for me, just in terms of kind of a metaphor or something, just to think about these two different things that totally relate. It's not like they're disconnected. It's not like the live concert is suddenly invalidated by quantum theory. Not at all. But they're really different thus far in the way we understand things. And I'm
going to go biblical metaphor on you.
Yeah.
In a way, quantum theory is one more attempt to build a Tower of Babel. So as to stare right into the eye of God, and really to say, we understand your magic trick. We pulled back the curtain, and Wizard of Oz, and we're calling your bluff.
Right. And yet that's still a bit of hubris for us to say we know your magic trick, because it's more like we caught a glimpse of it. but what the heck is really going on there and how that relates to our lives and experience, no idea. But I get that, and I think that's one of the things, like what is it, Niels Bohr? Is that one of the Niels, the first name, right? Yeah,
Niels Bohr.
He said the world is not only stranger than we thought, it is stranger than we could think. Yes. And I love that too, because it's to me, one of the things that I most appreciate about quantum theory, as I've come to understand it, which again is far from having any kind of expertise at all, but one of the things it really does call us to a kind of humility that I think is really critical for us as we continue forward as the human race, is to remember to be humble in what we know and we understand. And as one of the authors put it, that it really urges us to keep fluid our conception of what is reasonable, because suddenly it's like, oh, okay, we thought we had what's reasonable down with explanations of our experience of reality. But now we're finding there's some other kind of reasonable that seems completely unreasonable, but we're trying to figure it out. So just that humility, I think, is really, I've always felt like humility, a lot of people talk about humility as if it's this kind of self-hating or not confident or whatever kind of character. But to me, it's that's not humility. I don't know what that is, but that's something else. Humility to me is just a recognition of like our place in the universe. And the fact is, I am a tiny part of the universe. Even all of the science that we've come up with, as amazing as it is, I mean, we're sending people up to the space station. I think we've got 11 of them now, and we've got commercial ways to do that. I mean, that's incredible stuff. But at the same time, compared to reality, the totality of reality, it's like we've barely started this thing. And that's not to depress us. It's to just keep us honest. I think humility keeps you honest. That's the kind of, so I love that I think this quantum theory keeps us humble. So
it absolutely does. I think that's because at the end of the day, we don't know. And it's entirely possible that we will never have the answer to this question.
That's the other thing. I mean, that's what was fascinating too, is to read scientists and philosophers of science that are suddenly saying, it may be that we really will never fully understand what the totality of existence is. And again, maybe that'll change, because I would imagine that people would have thought, if somebody from 300, 400 years ago looked at a CD, they'd be like, oh, I never thought that would be possible, that you could actually grab music and bag it, for future use. So we may find some stuff out, but I love that idea that, hey, we may not actually ever know. That's kind of new to at least the popular stuff that I've been a part of, where it's kind of like, oh, we're eventually going to figure this whole thing out. And now it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm not so sure. So
one of the books that I turn to as we began to do my reading for this episode, for this podcast, was this book, which is just, oh my God, I adore this book. Okay. Why Does the World Exist by Jim Holt. It is, I'm buying you a copy, man. It's
I'd love to see it. Yeah.
Because he goes back and forth between theological and scientific.
Okay.
It really is. It's funny. At the end of the day, that is the inescapable question that I guess that we want to know. Will any of these theories answer that? Why? Why is all of this here? Now, with Abrahamic religion, you get the why. The why is built in. You don't have to ask why anymore, because God willed it to be so. I mean, isn't that the concept?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, one has to accept that up until the moment that God finally decided to first cause,
right,
he was just sitting there.
Right. We still don't have an answer to that same thing. I mean, theism does not answer that. So
God came from. Where
right.
Where did he come from?
And you're not going to find anything in any of the holy books of any religion I know that are going to actually be able to say this is where God started.
But but the point is, it is our common starting point.
That's right.
We both start with the inability to answer the question.
That's right. And I mean, I think we start, I would say there's a starting point just before that, which is we actually exist. You know, I am actually here. And then I ask, so where did I come from?
Indeed.
And then I ask, so where did all this stuff I'm a part of come from? You know, and those are the things that, I don't expect to get an answer to that that's just going to really lock it all in. Okay, now we got it all down. You know, maybe, but if we ever came up, I would say we'd be like 5 millennia away from even getting close to that, because we're just so far off of knowing, you know, and that's where the dark matter and stuff comes in to me is so interesting, is that we don't even know what the majority of the stuff in this, whatever it is that we're in, actually is. You know, so again,
we don't even know how we're having this conversation.
That's right. Well, and
that gets how the inner space of our brains work.
That's right. Because it really doesn't make sense. And this goes back to our Bryson, fetish. No, our enjoyment of Bryce. But it's just this. How did like all these little atoms get put together and agree on, like, who wrote the contract? Like, okay, atoms, you're going to come together and you'll be swapping out, with different skin cells and stuff, but you're going to form an Allen, and you're going to form an Allen for this amount of time. And then once this amount of time is done, you're free to go, but you're going to hang with it through this period. I mean, there's all this stuff that is just, and then not only that, but you're not just like a blob, but you're not, Alan. I want you to know that. But you're,
people will argue with you on that point, and they got some good arguments.
But when you get off of the couch, you're actually somebody. No, but you're this thinking being, and then that you have not even just opinions, but like thinking back to where you described the stage, I think it was, where you had the stairs up to the office. Yeah. That you had to, there was a whole experience that you had that caused all this stuff to get put away in a locked filing cabinet. And then you had to go through the struggle of deciding whether you were going to deal with that, because it's not working for you not to deal with it, which even that's weird. Why are we put together in a way that it doesn't work for us not to deal with this stuff? And then when we go and open
Where's all this happening?
Exactly.
Where is all this
happening? What is all of that? Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
But this also touches on the nature of the quantum question.
Yeah.
Where is all this coming from?
That's right.
What is motivating all of this?
Yep.
Why? For what purpose?
Yep. And I just appreciate where quantum theory is at this point, because it opens up a conversation again in ways that I felt like the conversation was sort of being shut down by, and this is the philosophical background, by positivism. It was kind of shut down, like, discussion about spirituality or metaphysics or all that is not reasonable. It's lame. We've got it all figured out. We don't have any room.
Say that positivism is dogmatic.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it became that because, and it's not like these were dumb.
Ow! How'd that hole get in my foot? Oh, I shot it there.
That's right. Idiot. But no. But it's understandable how people that are very intelligent and have put a lot of work into this would move in that direction. But now it's really not anymore, unless you're going to hold on to old dogma that rejects all of these new questions that have suddenly opened up.
The problem with the quantum world is it destroys the dogma of relativity, in essence, of the whole nature of scientific thinking. It doesn't throw it out.
No.
But it can no longer rest on its laurels.
Now here's a thought for you I wanted to run by you, because I find it fascinating, but I don't know if you would be open to it or not. would you be open to the possibility
Certainly
that
not.
over time, as people are struggling with quantum theory, that they might actually find that there's a theory that overturns everything we understand, but still okay, so in other words, there's two ways to do this. I thought I had it in my mind. Sorry, I didn't get it right. So let's say we've got these two things. What if quantum theory says not only, oh, we found a unified theory that keeps these two things working together, but what if what happens because of this really shows that all of this was actually wrong, but in a way that explained a lot of stuff? You know what I mean? Would you think that that's even possible, that we could say, actually, all of this was right because of a misguided notion? Or does it kind of have to say, no, it's only going to build on this stuff and develop it further?
I think it was the physicist Richard Feynman who pointed out that it's entirely possible that we think of time and space as two of the fundamentals of everything. It's entirely possible that time and space actually are the products of things more fundamental than them that we have no way of knowing about yet.
Right.
There are how this all works, we have a vague sense of it.
Yep.
There's plenty that we don't know, as you and I have pointed out. Our human eyes see available light, that's it. There's plenty of light racing past us all the time that we can't see.
Right.
All the time.
Right.
Plenty of sound we can't hear, things we can't smell. Information is flying past us nonstop that we are unable, we simply don't have the equipment aboard to see it, register, know what's even happening. And it's impacting us. It's not like
it's not irrelevant. Yeah, it actually is having an impact on us.
We talked about we don't know where our thoughts come from. Well, the whole consciousness itself, we have no idea where this comes from. Yep. The ability some people have, to be outside their consciousness. There are people have experiences, and we can quantify them and measure them, where their brains do things that are hard to explain if their brains are simply sitting inside their heads. That if consciousness is a real and viable entity, that we don't know how to measure per se, other than as an electrical rhythm. But in terms of where this happens, where do our memories go when we're not actually remembering them? They're all stored biochemically, but really in brain structure, there's something else at work here, absolutely, positively, and clearly, when you get down to the teeny weeny level of the quantum world, the most fundamental world, the thing upon which all of this rests, there are forces that we don't understand. At work.
And, one of the other things that struck me is that at least until somebody comes up with a unified theory, which is not a given, we can't really say anymore that there's just a universal one way that everything happens. That we're going to come up with one unified theory that's going to make sense of everything. We don't have a way to be sure that that's actually true, which is interesting to me, because it comes alongside, kind of one of the kind of deconstructionist, kind of postmodern philosophical approaches was to say that, that it was a real negative when we had a kind of universal understanding of ethics or of history or of whatever. There was a real movement against that, like that was a problem, and we need to see things more locally. At least where we are right now in terms of science, there's two different worlds. going on. There's not, and then the one new one that we found actually is impacted by the observer in the way that it functions or is seen to function. And so the idea that we're going to find one universe,
Yeah.
well, even the word universe, right, that is everything, is really up for grabs again, as a notion. And I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, is that kind of your sense in looking at this stuff too? Is that now we've got two different things, and so yeah, we can assume that we're going to pull them all back together again, but there's also a possibility that they're going to be like different things that function differently. And not only that, but when we observe the stuff at the quantum level, that changes it as well. That totally relates to what's actually going on there. So that means there's even more than that. So I don't know. Does that make sense, or is that not clicking?
You know, yes, it makes it, absolutely. It does. It's, you know, a couple weeks ago, I was sitting here Friday night by myself. For some reason, I forget where hell was. And 2001: A Space Odyssey was on Turner.
Yes. Yeah.
Turner, classic movies, and I found myself sitting watching it, really the whole bloody thing. And okay, I had a bit of THC in me. Okay, as one should.
I would imagine with a couple of the scenes in there, that must have made them quite amazing there. Huh? Yeah.
You know, it suddenly, it's trippy, but there's the idea of an intelligence beyond ours.
Yeah.
Because what puts the monolith there?
Right.
What's this higher intelligence?
Yeah.
That suddenly wants to reach out and touch us. And that's what they know. It was really, I found it so compelling. I've seen this movie a gazillion times.
Yep. No, I think that's, you know, and you know, you probably know you're doing this, but you're actually getting me very excited talking that way, because it's like, that's, you know, I've often felt like with all of the kind of alien shows and exploration of what might be out there and all that there's something in us as humans that we want something that's other, like that's really different than us, to actually exist. We would really be excited by that. That would be cool. And that, in terms of spirituality, that to me is totally related to spirituality, where you're having this sense of wonder and awe, for example, in nature, where it's like you could easily, the experience of being drawn outside of yourself could easily, with one step, take you to a place where you're saying, there's something else out there besides just us. And I think I just had a connection with whatever that something else out there is, because I was totally outside of myself. There was something else I was completely engaged in, just say the beauty of mountains, for example, where you just feel like I am just totally there with this mountain. I've totally forgotten about myself. I've forgotten about my existence, all that. I'm just experiencing this other thing. And I think that's where a lot of spirituality is seeded, like the seed is planted for people just saying, what was that? And was that something else? And then, as we talked about with Walter, you know, the Judeo-Christian tradition is very strong on this was revealed to us by God. We did not come up with it ourselves. This was the existence of God was revealed to us by God, not us figuring it out with our own minds. And I know that's a further number of steps than you would take, but to me, it is something that suddenly it has some grounding, because you've got this quantum world that's something that we can't even actually, when we observe it, it changes it. and we got to figure out. So the idea that there's something out there
The
that
whole
has
point
to
is that you
reveal,
almost can't observe it in a way.
that's right. That's right.
It's almost unmeasurable.
That's right. And that's what, there's a lot of theology outside of the Western world has all sorts of mystery in it, and is happy to have mystery. I mean, now we Westerners, especially in the modern period, didn't like mystery. And so the theologians and apologists started getting rid of it as quickly as they could, or explaining it away. But the fact is,
back in the day, in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
In the Middle Ages, math was not given much credence. Math was really used for just counting stuff. That was really it. The logic was important, and
Sure.
they would teach that.
Yeah. And rhetoric was
rhetoric. Yeah, of course. And theology was considered science.
It was the queen of the sciences.
That's right. Yeah, the queen of the sciences.
Quite a while. The queen of the sciences. Yeah, I mean, and that's where, I have a book on polymaths. And if you look back, they've got a listing of polymath through history. Up until the modern period, many of them were involved in theology. And then once you get to the modern period, the number involved in theology drops off rapidly, because that's no longer...
Because the problem is you have to show your work.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Once you have to show your work, it gets a little tricky.
And so from a theologian point of view, from a spirituality point of view, we suffered brain drain at that point, because a lot of the people that were really thinking deeply about this stuff were like, no, I'm moving on to science, philosophy, et cetera, because that stuff is, outmoded. But again, in my view, there's a new relevance, or at least possibilities for discussion and conversation at an intellectual level, at a serious intellectual level, that quantum theory opens up. And that's really exciting to me, because, I have always felt that theology has a contribution to make, and it's not... the straw man of kind of the Christian who can't really think themselves out of a barrel, coming to a conversation of people that are thinking deeply. It's kind of like, okay, fine. But the reality is there are people that are very serious intellectually who also grapple with theological issues, or even believe in God. It doesn't exclude thoughtfulness or reasonableness or any of that. And so again, I'm excited about reading this stuff, because like even Polkinghorne, the guy that I read, is a major scientist, and he's an Anglican priest, and for him, he's a very serious scientist. This was Oxford University that chose him to write the introduction on quantum theory. They're not going to pick some lame person to do this. This guy knows his stuff, but he doesn't see that as, in conflict. It certainly challenges, but it's not in conflict with his theism. And I just really appreciate that, and I'm excited about that. Now, can I throw out one more thing just to be provocative for the last little bit of...
I wish you would.
So here's my worry. My worry today, given all the turmoil that's going on, is that we still at the popular level think that we know how to fix things that are going on in our societies and in our world, that we in fact can fix it. What makes me nervous about that is I've read a lot of history, and a lot of times when we humans think we know how to fix something, we end up screwing it up and making it even worse. And that is one of the lessons, and maybe I'm taking this too far. I'd love to have a quantum theorist tell me I'm totally off base on this and I'm getting way into metaphysics or something. But to me, that's one of the lessons of this, is be careful as we work toward a better society. because you don't know everything, and you don't know the impact of everything you're going to do. And a lot of it's going to have an impact very different from what you expect it to do. And so back to that humility again, which is not inaction. I'm not saying don't change things. I'm saying be careful as we change things, because it's like Jenga. You know that Jenga game?
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, it's like there are people right now that are just saying, oh, it's this thing. And they pull out that one little part of Jenga, and it's like, oh, actually, that was supporting a lot of the structure, and I didn't understand that, and I ripped it out, and the structure fell. And so then you're in a worse situation than you were before. It's like, just all I would say is be thoughtful, strategic, think deeply, and be humble about the fact that you may not get what you think you're going to get when you charge ahead. So that's
well, in a sense, we live in, as ordered as the universe lives, it's kind of the chaos that things like string theory are trying to wrap their minds around.
Right.
Which, yeah, there's that. In a sense, you're describing a multiverse.
Well, let me give. Can I give you a really tangible example?
I think what you're saying is that a universal solution to a multiverse problem will cause problems in some of those multiverses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I buy into the multiverse thing, but the idea you've got is correct. But the way I would put it is, as a human being, I do not know the totality of reality. I have a grasp on a little part of it. And so therefore, what I need to do with a recognition that there's a much wider reality going on out there. That's where the multiverse could, there's a much wider reality out there than I know. And so I need to recognize that. And a quick example, I don't think I've used this in our podcast, but it's a favorite story of mine, is, maybe I have, but I'm going to say it again, is just when people give clothing to other people in other cultures because they care, they want to show their compassion. We have too many clothes, so let's give clothes to other cultures. Well, a German documentary tracked it to a West African nation. They followed the clothing from Germany to a West African nation to see the impact that it had. What is it people wanted it to do? They wanted it to go and clothe people that didn't have clothing, so that they'd have warmth, so that they'd be cared. They wanted to help. But what they found happened was that they were actually wiping out this West African country's clothing industry, because they couldn't compete with all of these free clothing items that were coming in and being distributed. So, yeah, people were now wearing T-shirts that were promoting Western companies rather than their traditional clothing. And on top of it, there was now more unemployment, or more companies struggling, or more people losing their jobs, because the whole garment industry, it threw a wrench into the whole thing. So this is just, in my mind, when it comes to climate change, when it comes to political change, and a whole host of issues, even like the whole renewable energy thing, we really need to think through, what's the system that's there, how is it functioning, and how do we make changes in such a way that we're not just inviting chaos to come in, but we're actually building upon what we've got in a way that makes it way better. And if we can do that in all of those kinds of arenas, then let's do it. Because that's where human beings are amazing. I mean, we adapt and develop and have ingenuity that's incredible, and you see that in the Space Odyssey. Yeah. I mean, from how culture develops, right? It's incredible. But we've got to, think it through. But
sometimes, just to be fair, the thing that's motivating change, the thing that's causing something to pop where nothing was,
yeah,
is, it might not just be because you want change for the sake of change. Sometimes the motivator is the need for justice, because
totally.
Because
but it
someone
needs
is
to
because
actually result in justice.
someone is kneeling on someone else's neck.
Sure, as long as it
And the
results
person
in
leaning, hey,
justice.
and the person leaning on the other person's neck seems to have it in their head that this is okay.
Sure,
Because
agreed.
in the face of everyone around them going, get off his neck, get off his neck, get off his neck. That man stared everybody down as if,
Right.
don't tell me what to do.
But has justice been done? That's the question.
Justice cannot be done with one verdict. No.
Right, but that's the thing is we've got to define justice clearly and then figure out how to move toward it, because otherwise we're going to miss it, because there are a lot of groups that have tried for justice and have missed it.
But let me give you, for instance. Okay, so you have two groups of people that look at this event from very different points of view, and they see the change that's going to result from this very differently. And I'm just, there are 2 points of view here. One side is the people who see social justice, that you can't do this. A police officer can't do this. And on the other side, there is a culture that says, yes, we can. And they are resistant to the idea that they cannot do this. I'm not judging. I'm simply saying it exists, and it seems to work greatly. And his attitude is, I don't want to change.
I'm just,
understood. But that's, I'm just saying that's sometimes, that is the change that, and again, I'm not saying it judgmentally. I'm simply saying as objects in history to which there are what causes something to happen versus nothing to happen. It's the same stuff.
And I am in no way justifying doing nothing at all. But, and I think already I would say that second group that wants nothing to change has become very small at this point already. But because change has already, change is only just beginning to work until this way of thinking stops, that you can do that to another person. Right. Although at least racial justice change has been happening. Looking back at Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech, it was shocking to me to see that he specifically talked about police brutality, and then just thinking about our situation today. But he did mention other laws and things that have changed, and that's good as well. But all I am saying is that when we get into the business of change, which we're in whether we like it or not, it's not like we have a choice. But all I'm saying is let's do change with as much strategy as possible so we get what we want. Because there are so many examples of people being activists for the sake of activism because they're just sick of it. And I'm going way back, like hundreds of years and thousands of years. There are lots of examples of people doing that where it actually doesn't get them anywhere. Versus the people.
Activism for the sake of activism is masturbation. Please go do that in your room. Leave the rest of us alone.
And I understand. I understand people getting, people like, and even with climate change, that we've got a real concern here. I get that. But how do we solve it? That's where we need to have our conversation. What is the best way for us to solve these issues? And there's some great books out there, I think, that really seriously are thinking that through. And I would encourage anybody listening, take time to do some reading on this thing. If you're going to be, jumping on whoever's bandwagon.
Yes.
Know what you're talking about.
In any conversation, yes, it always helps. Nothing is worse. Nothing makes a conversation more pointless than people taking part in it who do not know what they're talking about, who don't have, who bring neither receipts nor any real.
And you're just using snippets from other people.
Yeah.
But you haven't thought more deeply about it. I think that's where, one example that was in, I thought, a really good book on the environment. Maybe we should talk about this sometime. But one example was natural gas versus wood burning in the underdeveloped world. that a lot of times the policies that are being pushed are, let's get rid of natural gas. And it's like, okay, in this environment, yes. In this environment, actually, if natural gas was more available, then that would reduce the amount of wood being burned, which would actually be a plus for the world. But if you just take away natural gas, then what's left is the wood burning, which is one of the worst types of fuel usage possible. So
it needs to lead. No, you're making a great point, Randy. The first world needs to lead and not simply tell the second and third worlds what to do while doing the diametric opposite.
And to assume that what works in our quote unquote universe is also the exact same strategy that would work in another person's universe, because that's just not the case. That's not true, because our lives are set up in very different ways, and the fuels that we have access to are different fuels. So anyway, all of that to say, I just, that's what I urge. And as a pastor, part of where this is coming from for me, I don't want to see people jump on yet another bandwagon that gets them nowhere and they become even more cynical. I feel bad for when any of us hope and then that hope is dashed. That is a very painful thing, and indeed. I've experienced that. And
do you know who the writer Anand Girardin? I'm going to say his name badly. Anand Girardis. There we go. Girardis. Anand Girardis is. No. He's a lovely, very left-wing thinker. One of the things that one of the demons that he goes after are big corporations that donate lots and lots of money to charity, but only after having caused the problem in the first place. That charity, after you've made a mess, thanks anyway.
Well, and a lot of the smart ones are getting into renewables now. I mean, if you look at who's behind some of the renewable push, it's not a number of the folks that are key on that have made their money through non-renewable energy, and they're just jumping ship. And I have a bit of a problem with that as well. It's like, wait a minute, because it's you're an opportunist at that point. So I hear you. Now, I think that's a great point.
No argument.
I think that's a great point. So anyway, that was my attempt to be provocative with this. But, I would just encourage people, do your best to find stuff on quantum theory. If you're not into math and not trained enough in the sciences, then find things like Polkinghorns or some other stuff where they don't do the math, and work hard on it. It's still hard reading for me anyway. But do your best and just make sure you're not.
We have some terrific books that we're going to suggest that are very approachable and actually make some of this. Yeah, it makes it approachable and definitely worth the time and effort. Carry on.
Well, and last, let's definitely get some people of some different generations and different universes. Let's just run with that to get involved in our conversation, because that's, just generationally, I think, aren't we like one of the first in history to have 5 generations that are all trying to inhabit the same planet alive at the same time? I heard that somewhere. So even, what would be fun is to try to get representatives from as many of those generations as can actually speak. Some of them might be too young, but also to get folks from different cultures into this conversation. Because I just would be fascinated by that and just see what can we talk about, what conversations just fall flat, what conversations take off, all of that, and so I'm looking forward to our podcast multiverse really taking off here.
In a way that's what makes podcasts such a fascinating place. It is like a multiverse. It is a multiverse. There is everything out there, and then there are podcasts for literally everyone. It literally is. If there are infinite possibilities, if that's what our universe is, and frankly, I just love the storyteller, and he loves the thought that there are a million variations on our exact lives.
Yes.
That just off to the side, we can't see it, we can't perceive it, is a slight variation. It looks like us, it sounds like us, and yet.
Yep. No, I do too. And one little snippet that's kind of a nerd snippet, I guess, but one of the things that modern Western theologians struggled with was the fact that there were so many interpretations, theological interpretations over the last 2,000 years of the Bible. But now suddenly, that's not quite as big of a problem as it had been for the pre-quantum mind that was like, no, one document, one interpretation only. Now it's suddenly like, oh, there's a whole variety of ways that people have interpreted these passages in different cultures and times, and we can actually start to see that as a rich resource rather than a problem, because we're trying to get everything just to fit into one unified theological theory of how the Bible should be read and lived out. So that a little nerd factoid, but I love, that's one of the things I love because of my upbringing and where I've lived and all that, is to actually just explore and enjoy the multitude of expressions rather than feeling like I have to get it all to fit into one expression that my mind is happy with.
There is something rather forgiving about a multiverse.
There is. No, seriously, because I mean, and for anybody that's creative, it's like it's a toy box, man. It's like somebody's just opened this huge toy box for you. It's like, go play. It's like, yes, I'm going to do this. So I love that.
What if it is?
Yeah. Right.
On that bombshell.
Well done, Alan. Way to pull that together. Right? That was good. That was very good.
Randy, this was, can I use the word transcendent?
You can. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyable on a topic that honestly I wasn't sure how this would fly, but man, this really flew.
As we said early on, before we realized we'd already started the conversation, this is another. It's a being in nothingness. It's a first cause conversation, and that's the most basic question we could possibly have.
That's right.
The where, the why, the who.
Yes. Yep. All right, man.
Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you again.
Definitely. Looking forward to talking with you more next week.